Welcome to the Aesthetic Doctor Podcast. We don't shy away and keep secrets here. We empower you with education, telling you the truth about all things aesthetic medicine while encouraging you to be the best version of yourself. It's time to look great and feel good doing it. This is your host, mom, speaker, and board-certified physician, Dr. Judith Borger.
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 63 of the Aesthetic Doctor Podcast. This is Dr. Borger, and today we are going to talk about a concept in coaching as well as overall happiness and psychology called the gap and the gain, or the gap versus the gain, which is a concept that was really brought forth by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan in their work and in their revolutionary book called The Gap and the Gain. And let me tell you how I really came to wanting to talk about this topic. Brooke Castillo, who a lot of you might know, but if you don't know her, she's the founder of the Life Coach School and a really pioneer in life coach work. She was also trained by Martha Beck, who I got certified through. So about a month or so ago, released a podcast called My Last 10 Years, where she basically reflected on her last decade of life and work. And what that made me do, and I'm hoping it's going to make you do the same, is to reflect on my last decade of life and work. So when this podcast comes out, it's going to be June 2024. And when I think about where I was, June 2014, I was just graduating fellowship. And to be honest, I was not in a very supportive fellowship at all. I almost quit fellowship a couple times. I hated fellowship. I was sort of looking for jobs, still interviewing, not really getting offers that I wanted because I wasn't supposed to have them. Now that I look back at it, had sort of accepted staying at Duke for now on a clinical sort of position versus a full academic, like tenure track position. I was about to sign with Cape Fear Valley after working for Duke for a little bit. I was about to sign with Cape Fear Valley, where I was going to start in October. And honestly, I've been there since, but I digress. In terms of my personal life, I had just met my husband. So we were a couple weeks into our relationship. Everything was obviously new and exciting and full of like endorphins and romance and high-charged sexuality, but there wasn't that stability yet of where was our relationship going to go? Was this long-term compatible? Did we both kind of want the same things? Of course, even though we were really falling for each other. I was renting an apartment in Durham with a roommate. My loveliest, best dog, Moxie, was still alive. I was driving a Subaru. I was doing CrossFit. And my son, Antonio, at the time was almost 10. He was a great age. But really, when I look back in what I have accomplished in this last decade, this decade for me has really been a sort of decade of prosperity, I would say. If I was going to give it one term, it would be prosperity, because from coming out of training, I have really established my academic career. I have published lots. I was a founding faculty member as a resident at a residency, and I know I've trained amazing residents. I'm very secure in my practice. I'm very happy in my practice. I've been with the same organization for almost 10 years. I have founded multiple companies and they're going amazingly well. So I've sort of added this entrepreneurship, and really I've done so much personal growth and development because 10 years ago, I was really searching for this lasting relationship. I wanted to get married. I wanted to have kids. I had really, at the time, no financial stability in the sense that I had the promise of a job and I had moonlighted and I was able to pay my bills. but there wasn't that cushion, these investments, like that security. And so I think with my career, also financially, what I've created is this financial stability, that really prosperity and finances, where of course, like, I'm by no means like financially independent or secure so I can just retire and walk away. But the fact that I have for the last 9 years had a beautiful house that we own and have renovated. I own another property now for my business. We've made investments. I'm 10 years into a career versus 10 years ago I was coming out of training, where, like, let me tell you, you are so freaking broke when you come out of training. And then the prosperity really came in sort of the fulfillment of a lot of the things that I had really so desperately wanted. I really wanted to get married. I wanted to have children. Like, I was yearning to have children. And I, of course, a year later, I guess 13 months from 10 years ago, I was to get married to Benjamin, my husband, and we had the most beautiful wedding in church and with so many friends and family. And we've now, next month, really when this comes out, been married 9 years. We've had our house for 8 years, and we have 2 amazing, beautiful children who were really my heart's and soul's deepest desire. It's really my children and my family that are the fulfillment of my dreams, because really career, financial security, and all of that is nice. And I just remember just yearning for children so much. And even though I had my son and I was very happy with him, of course, like, I love my son. He, by the way, he just graduated from college. So my kid went from being this 9-year-old, almost 10-year-old kid who would go to summer camps like fencing and dodgeball and nature camp and things like that, to now graduating last weekend with an associate. He has grown into a wonderful young adult, but I knew I wasn't done after one. Like, I wanted more children, and having 2 amazing children who just have taught me so much about love and have given me so much joy and happiness and fulfillment. And oh my God, like, Vanessa and Miles are the best things, along with Antonio. But again, looking back 10 years, I had him, but I did not have them. So that's kind of what I mean, is that it does not mean I was unhappy with my first child, because he's amazing. He'll forever be my first, especially as there's a gap between them. So of course he got to be my only for a decade. But the fact that when we look at 10 years ago versus now, like, having my 2 youngest children has absolutely changed my world. So when I think about prosperity, I think about the richness and the prosperity in all the things that I truly wanted, which was to have more children, to be married, to have a family. And so when I think about the last 10 years, that is what I think about: my family, my marriage, building the life that we have. That has really been the last decade. My husband and I, from just having met to building this amazing, rich, full, joyous life that we have. And that's what I think of prosperity, of getting all the things that we want. Of course, there is other developments, like having done so much personal work, really healing generational trauma, really growing in what I want, and also like a disillusion too with corporate medicine and a journey into entrepreneurship. But when I think back of these last 10 years, I'm just so proud of where we came from and what I have built and what my husband and I together have built, and the family that we've created and the life really that we've created. Of course, there's been a lot of traveling and a lot of joyous moments and some sad ones on all of the ones. But when I look back at my last 10 years, that is really what stands out for me in this complete decade of bloom and prosperity. And my children are all blooming. My son, as I said, graduate. My other ones are growing up. One of them is in school now, about to finish first grade. The other one is excited to go to kindergarten in a year, and he can't wait. They all play sports. We travel. We have a good time. And then, of course, a very successful foray into entrepreneurship. Not just one, but two businesses, finding my voice, this podcast, so much growth and healing, and also really being secure in who I am and finding love for myself and really reconciliation. And yes, so much coaching and so much self-love and self-development and all the things. But anyway, I invite you at this moment, like if you stop and think about 10 years ago, June 2024, or whenever you listen to this podcast, where were you? And then fast forward to now. Where are you now? What are the things that you can be proud of? And also things that happen that might not initially be seen as wins, like what are the lessons? What is the growth? What is the opportunity? But most of us, I think, that extra decade, like we can be so proud of so many things. So I really invite you at this moment to take a moment to reflect and to really celebrate yourself for this amazing last decade. And that brings me to the concept of the gap and the gain. So really, the way this starts out is that humans inherently live in what we call the gap, where we compare who we are now to who we want to be. So for example, I can say, oh, my business had not had $1 million year. I'm not financially independent. I am not X, Y, and Z. I'm sure you can think of a multitude of things where you're not quite where you want to be. You might not have the relationship you want to have. You might not be the weight that you want to be, like whatever it is, right? But basically, the concept of the gap is that if we are living in the gap, it's a life of really unhappiness, because we always we always change and we always set goals. So then we're never really at the goal yet. And that means in that comparison, we're always falling short, meaning we're always in the gap. There's a gap between where we are and where we want to be. When we focus only on the future and we never look back, but only look forward, we're always falling short because we're not quite there yet. Versus when we focus on what Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy called the gain, what we're really doing is we're comparing who we are now to who we used to be. So just like I did in my reflection, and thank you for witnessing me and indulging in this, but you can see how far you have come, all the wonderful things you have done, or at least how far you have grown. So that is to be in the gain and to live in the gain. And the idea is that by stopping and looking back and seeing your progress and celebrating your progress, you shift your thinking to sort of live overall a happier life. So Hardy and Sullivan, in their book, which is a brilliant book, as are all of their other books, argue that making this change from only looking at the gap towards the gain can drastically improve the quality of your life. So again, gain thinking is focusing on how far you have come or the gains that we have made, versus gap thinking is focusing your thoughts on the gap between where you are now and where you want to be. According to Hardy and Sullivan, and I completely agree with them on this, is gap thinking is detrimental to your happiness because you're always falling short, to your self-esteem because, again, you haven't reached your goal yet. And subsequently, they argue that it's also not good to your physical health based on stress levels and all of the things. versus gain thinking really improves happiness, improves your self-esteem, and subsequently improves your physical health. So comparison is the driving force between the two of these ideas, and the direction of comparison is really what differentiates the two ways of thinking. So gap thinking is measuring forward, and it's using your ideal future as the object of comparison. And that's also the issue, that a lot of times we're never reaching our ideals, right? Or reality happens, and reality might be better than what we have originally thought for us, but it might not have been reaching those original goals. Why gap thinking is measuring backwards and using your past self and your own unique path in life instead. And I think the other thing that I want to bring up is that we talk a lot about comparison and the fact that sometimes comparing yourself to other people, right, is like social comparison. So let's say you see somebody else's business success or weight loss success or travels on Instagram and social media, and it makes you feel bad because you're not there yet. The authors actually talk about that, and they classify that as gap thinking as well, because you are also measuring yourself between what is a social perceived ideal, right? Like, I should be able to be in Europe right now for 3 weeks versus working. But again, we all start differently. We all have different starting points in life. And I think all of us can be so proud of where we have come from. And all of our paths are different in life because your path is unique, and you are the only one that has overcome your exact circumstances of upbringing, who is working with possibly your learning disability, your early childhood trauma, you coming out of poverty, you beating illness, or you just taking your own path in life that you needed to take to get the compassion that you have now, the trials that you needed to learn, versus comparing yourself with the other's perceived path. So gain thinking is inherently optimistic. We know that optimism can prolong and improve the quality of your life, again, because we are celebrating ourselves, we're recognizing ourselves, and both of these things really have cumulative effects versus whether you always live in not being enoughness versus really celebrating your accomplishments and your enoughness. So anyway, I hope this was a nice little primer into thinking of the gap versus the gain. And as always, want you to catch your own thought patterns. There's nothing wrong with setting goals and living from your ideal future. And we talk about that a lot, that you do want to set goals. However, feeling inadequate because your goals you have not reached yet is what's detrimental, right? Judging yourself for it, comparing yourself to an ideal future goal. Like, for example, if you do want to have $1 million business, that's a maybe 10-year goal for you. That's maybe not ever a goal for you. But as I said, it's wonderful to have it as a goal. But for me to be like, oh, I'm such a loser because I'm not there yet, or I'm not there, is the detrimental in thinking versus looking at back and be like, wow, 8 years ago, I did not even have a business. And look, now I have this beautiful business that provides employment for 7 different people, that changes people's lives, that makes profit while it's at it. That is the gain thinking. That does not mean I don't have goals. It just means that I'm also stopping to acknowledge how far I've come. And a lot of times we have enough people in the world telling us we're inadequate that I think like we are the ones that should be kind and encouraging to ourselves. Sort of like you would be to a best friend, right? Would you tell your best friend who's 4 years into business, well, you totally suck because you haven't made $1 million yet? Or would you tell them, wow, like, look how far you've come. Like, you've opened a studio, you're self-employed, like your patients or clients love you, like this is amazing, right? So again, please, 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 for today, recognize when you're in gap thinking and just take a moment maybe to reflect on your last year, your last quarter, your last decade, your last phase of life, or whatever time you want to focus on, and think about the gains you have made personally, professionally, health-wise, growth-wise, wisdom-wise. There's so many gains to be recognized and celebrated. Until next time, have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening to the Aesthetic Doctor Podcast with Dr. Judith Borger. We'd love to connect with you outside of the show. Follow Dr. Borger on Instagram at Dr. Borger and find more online and ways to work with Dr. Borger at www.theaestheticdoctor.com. Until next time, be well.